Hello and welcome back to the Futurism at JG podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas, and today I'm joined by Neha, who is a public health and MoCell double major and CS and WGS double minor. So, huge overachiever here. Love if you could just say hi.
Yeah, hi. It's great to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, so today's topic is something we're both really interested in, and that's our future beyond Earth. Um, my favorite book and movie is The Martian by Andy Weir. Epic book, epic movie, highly recommend both. But essentially, it's all about this astronaut who gets stranded on Mars and has to use his survival instincts and also pretty hilarious sense of humor to survive. And it got me thinking about, could that be us in the future? Not the stranded part, not the stranded part,
Not.
but could that be us on Mars in the future? And I think Elon Musk, who's a huge figure in the news today for better or worse, he's been trying to get us there, right? And he wants to set up colonies on Mars with millions of people, and he's been doing his his SpaceX rocket and everything. Obviously, not as much success as he's been hoping with it, but it got me thinking about are we going to be able to do it in the next few decades? Because for example, there's the Artemis mission.
Right.
NASA's kind of setting up right now, aiming to go to the moon, right?
Yeah.
And we haven't been to the moon in half a decade. I mean, half a century. Like it's been a full 5 decades since we've been to the moon, and so NASA's trying to get us back there.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's the first step before Mars is, can we kind of go back to the moon and set up a colony on the moon, and then go for Mars after that. But it definitely raises the questions of, is space travel still very valuable to us, since we've been perhaps focusing on more Earth issues like war and climate change and things like that, rather than traveling to space. But curious to hear what you think about those initiatives.
Well, I think space travel, especially in recent years, with Elon Musk, has been really booming. And before, the space race used to be this competition, right, between Russia, China, and the US. I think now it's a lot more collaborative, which has really helped some of the advances in technology, like the reusable rockets, which is super cool. But one thing that you said that reminded me, you were talking about The Martian, right? I watched this docuseries maybe on Netflix called Mars, and you'd be surprised what it's about. It's about Mars, but it's about Mars in a really interesting way. It's half documentary, half actual show. So the show part is the first man led expedition to Mars, and they want to set up a colony there, right? But it occasionally cuts to Elon Musk and SpaceX and current efforts to I don't know, bolster our space travel agenda of sorts. And so that kind of talks about how Mars colonization would work in a realistic manner, I suppose. So they have their fun little tents, the expandable habitats and stuff. So there's definitely been a lot of people thinking about how life on Mars could potentially be realistic.
Yeah, that got me thinking about when you mentioned the collaboration kind of thing versus competition. It raises the point of which is better for development, because I think in the end, humans are collaborative, right? Just evolutionarily, that's how we survived, right? We formed tribes and we collaborated. But competition has also led to some of the greatest advancements. And like you were saying, it was a huge competition between the US and China and so I guess Soviet Union. Was it Soviet Union at that time?
At that time, yeah.
Yeah. Now Russia. It's this huge competition between the global superpowers. And so that really, really fostered this competition that got us to the moon. And unfortunately, it's been the same thing with nuclear weapons, right?
Right.
There's no way we'd have so tens of thousands of nuclear weapons, if not more, if it weren't for the US and Russia going after each other. And so for better or worse, I think competition has maybe kind of fostered innovation more than collaboration has, in a sense, because it's created this urgency that collaboration doesn't, right? Collaboration is better. just from a human standpoint, it's better to collaborate. But maybe we need a space race again of some sorts to kind of get us going, because it's been very stagnant for the past few decades. And like maybe kind of, I would argue that maybe Elon Musk has been the only, person, maybe Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson a little bit with their kind of things, more for like commercial, kind of like low orbit space travel. But, they're not really talking about going to the moon or Mars as much as Elon Musk is. And so I don't know, maybe it needs to be more of a competition. Maybe Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson, they need to fight each other, and then we need to have like the US and China and Russia kind of fighting each other so you can get to the space first. I mean, like that's a heck of a lot better. But like the World Cup. Exactly. But for the moon. Yeah. But it's it's for advancing humanity as a whole. It's not like, right now with all the warfare going on, right? Yeah. Where it's one country trying to, gain or hurt another country for their own benefit. Space travel, I think, would benefit all of humanity. And I think one thing I was thinking of also is the ISS, the International Space Station. That's been a huge collaboration between everyone, all the space agencies, throughout the world. So, curious to think to hear what you think about the ISS, and if we should, I don't know, should we have more international space stations, or should we just have the one and try to expand it maybe?
Well, I do know that with the Artemis missions, there's a few more planned in the future as well. And NASA actually kind of wants to start having some sort of physical structural presence on the moon. And with that, that structural presence would be a little standalone thing from the International Space Station. So, I mean, there is that. That seems pretty nice, like a fun little moon base of sorts for all of the international community to just hang out on the moon, as one does. But yeah, that should be super interesting. Something you said earlier about competition also reminded me, something we have to think about now that we didn't have to think about in the previous space race is commercial competition for the moon and Mars and things like that. There is this space treaty that has a formal name that I can't remember that says international governments can't use moon resources for their own benefits, but it doesn't say anything about commercial use of the moon. So that's an interesting thing to think about. Whoever gets there first, can they actually start harvesting moon minerals and rocks or whatever? And I do know I don't know how legitimate this guy on the internet is, but there is this company who's selling acres of the moon, and this man says he's made over $1 million doing it. I don't know how realistic or how legitimate those purchases are, but using the moon as an economic competition sort of environment is something that we have to think about now too.
That's a really that's really interesting. Yeah, I had no idea that was going on. That also reminded me, when you're talking about the treaty, of kind of, I mean, I don't really want to be talking about warfare again, but space, just think of Star Wars or Star Trek, right? No matter where humans go, there's violence and conflict and war. And so it kind of begs the question of, will we take that into space, and what would that look like? And that's a very terrifying feature to think about. But it does mean that we have to have stricter treaties and stuff, like you're saying, for preventing commercialization of the moon and stuff like that, and also preventing warfare on the moon and space and stuff like that. So, and another thing that got me thinking of was we have this huge space junk problem. Yeah. Right? There's just junk just orbiting the Earth, and it's there was this visual that I looked up online of space junk, and there's just I don't know, hundreds of thousands of just little remnants of things just floating around.
There's just a ring around the Earth.
It's just a ring around the Earth. So it's geez, we're already polluting, we've already polluted our planet. Yeah. And now we're polluting, outer space. And so that also begs the question of, how can we be sustainable? Because
Right.
in the end, part of why we want to look beyond Earth is maybe for second planet, for planet B, which is obviously not, at this point, it's probably better to focus on Earth. But some people are thinking like, you know, Elon Musk is like, you know, Earth's going to be gone at some point. We should move to Mars or somewhere else. But it begs the question of, can we be sustainable
Yeah.
on another planet or in outer space? Because, you know, we have to be efficient with our resources, and we've not been efficient with our resources on Earth. So why would we be any different in outer space or on the moon or
Yeah.
Mars or wherever? So yeah, there's some big questions for humanity to think about when it's, you know, going beyond Earth, because, you know, we want to kind of have a, you know, a good like future to look forward to, and not just kind of repeat the same mistakes
Right,
that
yeah.
we've done on Earth. But yeah, I'm actually, I'm curious to hear what you think about if we should be focusing more on Earth and trying to like save our planet, you know, before thinking about other planets first. Like, do you think it's possible for us to find a planet B in time, or is it maybe too ambitious of a timeline at this point?
Well, okay. I have a few different thoughts on this. One is that I know that like every time NASA, Elon Musk, whoever talks about Mars exploration, there is always a group of environmental protesters protesting it. And not just one, there's so many because like as you said, you know, we're humans and we tend to repeat a lot of the same mistakes. So is it really possible for us to like actually take care of and protect a new environment that we're not used to? Like so many people think we can't do that. Honestly, I don't think we can either because, you know, we exist, we create a lot of waste, we create a lot of pollution just because of our lifestyles, and I don't think that can regress into anything super sustainable. But I also think we are species and we exist and, you know, we want to like continue the human species, right? And part of that is like ensuring our future. And at this point, the earth is like, have you heard like a few years back, I think we like passed that one day where like all of the carbon damage to the earth is not reversible anymore?
Oh yeah, the like the UN thing where they gave us like
Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah, like
So now
so
it's like 8 years or less, 7 years
yeah, you
almost
know,
now.
clock's ticking. I don't think too much will happen before then. There's a ton of like great international and national sustainable efforts that are definitely going on, and I think those will definitely help. And I also don't think that like a planet B is within our timeline like at all. Like I don't think
I would agree. Yeah.
anyone's thinking about that at this point, but I do think that like if space exploration advances to a certain point, then that could be a viable option. But I think it's probably more like economically and just more feasible to focus on the earth at this current point.
Yeah, I mean, even if we somehow found a planet B, I mean, at that point, you know, that'd probably be the distant future, right?
Yeah.
That'd be like, I mean, the planets we're looking at, besides maybe like Mars, and like, that's actually another thing I was gonna ask you about, is like terraforming Mars. There's like this whole, there's this video on YouTube. I believe it's by, I think it's Kurzgesagt, which is like one of my favorite YouTube channels. They did a whole video on like what terraforming Mars would look like, and that's like a whole process.
Yeah.
So like either we're doing this like crazy theoretical process to Mars and like moving there, or we're finding this planet that's like insanely far away and we'd like never be there in time until like Earth is just like in ashes essentially.
Yeah.
Like is basically what it'd be.
There's this one
yeah.
astronaut, well, he's retired now, did a lot with NASA. His name's Jim Green, if I recall correctly. He's a big supporter of terraforming Mars. He's like, all we gotta do is put up this huge magnetic shield to block like all of the solar wind from the sun, because like that's what strips Mars' atmosphere of like a lot of its fun stuff for life. So he's like, oh, if we just put up a big magnetic shield, that'll like increase the pressure. Mars has pretty low pressure, and that'll like heat up the surface. You know, water, ice can melt. like life can maybe be a little bit more viable. Yeah, he's a big fan of this magnetic huge shield idea, which is interesting because he's like he was with NASA for like I think since like 1980, and he only recently ish retired. So he was there for a lot.
Wow. I'm surprised I didn't know his name. You said Jim Green?
Jim Green, yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Jim Green is telling us to go terraform Mars,
Yeah.
I guess. How would that work though? Like
Right?
putting this, you said,
Putting a huge
would it have to be all
shield.
around?
That's
Mars?
the thing I was wondering about. I don't know. Apparently, he's working on a paper about this. So be on the lookout for that, I guess.
All right, publish
Yeah.
this paper so we can see what this
Yeah, I'm
this
very
wild
curious.
idea is about. Yeah, I mean that got me thinking about if we can kind of use the sun more efficiently, because the sun is just like this intense ball of gas, and like it's extremely hot and emits like so much heat and light that we're just not taking advantage of. I remember watching a video once that said if we covered the entire surface of the earth in like solar panels, it would provide us like the energy input for like a whole I forget what the exact stat is, but like the essence of it is there's so much untapped energy from the sun especially that we're just not taking advantage of. And like maybe that's something that we should be investing more in, is the expansion of like solar panels and things like that, and also making them a lot more efficient. Like if someone can come through with like a breakthrough tech that just like makes solar panels way more efficient and less expensive than they are, I think that could be a very feasible solution to kind of move us from fossil fuels and things like that. So yeah, huge untapped potential from the sun.
That's another thing to talk about too, like the sustainability of space travel, because making a rocket is not very sustainable, especially because like, well, at least in the past and even now still, like you use a rocket, you can't really reuse it. Maybe you can reuse parts of it. You typically can't reuse all of it. And just the actual making of the rocket itself uses like super rare and complicated parts, right? Lots of waste and lots of materials that will eventually run out at some point, because we're always consuming more than the earth can naturally produce. So that's always something to think about too. And with that, I read this article about mining asteroids, which is interesting. The article said that, as space travel becomes more and more like economically feasible, so will asteroid mining. And I mean, asteroids do have like a ton of minerals that would be useful, obviously. But yeah, that's another thing to think about, like just the use of resources. And yeah, that's like another reason we like space exploration is good too, right? Because eventually we're going to use the Earth's resources to a capacity where we just like can't live here anymore without interplanetary support.
Yeah, in a previous episode, John, who's like one of the co-hosts, he was like, are humans, he was like posing this question at the end of one of our episodes. He was like, are humans living within or beyond like the ecological limit in a sense? Like, are we still a part of nature, or are we just like this, almost like a separate part of Earth that's just like destroying it? I mean, essentially it's like, you know, to me it kind of makes me think that even if we do find other resources like asteroids or like other planets or whatever, that we're just gonna destroy those too.
Yeah.
Like, I know I said this at the beginning, but I wrote a short story, and it was basically about how humans had like traveled across the universe. We'd like become like masters of the universe in a sense, like we, you know, colonize all planets and galaxies and stuff. And the whole premise of it was we pretty much destroyed everything. We sucked like the life out of the universe. We used all the universe's resources, and then we're left with like a very finite amount of resources. And then I kind of go into like, we sent 2 humans back in time. Like we were able to like find time travel. We sent them back in time to give humanity a fresh start. So like that's a little, you know, out there, but it, you know, it begs the question of like, you know, if we can't take care of our Earth, how can we take care of humanity beyond Earth. And so, as much as I'm a fan of space travel, I would agree with the climate activists that we should focus here first, figure out our problems here, and like once we've been able to be sustainable, then I feel very good about humanity's future beyond Earth. And I think it's like totally acceptable if we can be efficient and sustainable with our resources and not just like destroy everything in our path.
No, yeah.
Essentially. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's definitely one of the big questions of our time is the planet B in space versus focus on Earth dilemma. And so I don't know, there's definitely not a consensus on it, I think. And that's definitely a conversation which we're having right now. That should be had more often. Because I mean it's our future, right? Like as of right now, Earth is the only thing we have, and it's like this existential crisis that the way we're going, we're literally going to destroy our home. Like it's pretty crazy, like the kind of I don't know, maybe like ignorance in a way
for sure
that we have of like we've been given this deadline of like the irreversible climate thing, or like before carbon emissions become like irreversible. And so I think people just aren't taking it seriously because it doesn't feel that immediate. And I've always talked about this like immediacy versus distance like effect, where if you're not like close to a problem or experiencing the problem yourself, then you don't feel like it affects you, because it doesn't directly, but eventually it will come back to bite all of us. So it's my existential pondering into the future of humanity.
As one does on the daily. Sustainability is definitely, I think, a really big thing to focus on in literally everything, like not just space travel, but just in general, because like as you said, like we have to take care of this planet first before we can be confident in ensuring that we'd be able to actually keep another planet up and running. Something you also said made me think about like the actual physical traveling to said planet B would not be very easy. Like we just aren't built for space travel is the other thing too, right? And it would also take a very, very long time, most likely, unless someone can figure out how to get a rocket to travel at light speed. But even then, that would take a while, right? So definitely focusing on the Earth like should always be our biggest priority. Even if like theoretically we colonized like a few other planets here and there, like Earth would be our origin anyway, so it should always be our priority.
When you mentioned the space travel thing, it got me thinking about how we would do that, right? Because either we'd have to, and there's a lot of movies based on this, like I think Passengers was one of them with like Jennifer Lawrence and who was the other actor? Why am I blanking on the actor's name? Chris Pratt, I think. Sorry if I just butchered his name. But anyways, they are put in like a cryo sleep essentially. Where you're basically like kind of freezing the human body in like this like coma essentially, until you reach your destination. And so that's potentially something that we could do. And there's humans actually right now who are frozen. Like they're in they're not, I don't know if I would say cryosleep because they're technically dead. Like they've died and then they've been put in cryosleep, so like they're more like cryo death or something, like cryopreservation, I guess would be the correct term right now. But something like that. And obviously these humans kind of have banked on future tech, like hoping that some future tech can revive them. And obviously that doesn't exist right now, but if we could do something like that where we put people in cryo sleep, obviously don't let them die and then put them into so like put them into sleep and then they wake up on their destination, that could be something. Another thing I was thinking of when you're saying human bodies aren't fit for space travel, actually got me thinking of a few different options. One, which was one of our episodes, actually our last episode, was genetic modification. Could we genetically modify humans to be more kind of resistant and like tough and durable? The second thing it got me thinking of was either like kind of creating like maybe like android bodies or something
Mm-hmm.
for ourselves. So like not like human flesh, but like being like robots essentially.
Cyborgs.
Like putting our consciousnesses onto computers, or like some kind of like cyborg or android
Mm-hmm.
body, or even like just living like digitally
Yeah.
on like computers or something. Those are also potential, obviously very very theoretical possibilities, but yeah, I mean that's definitely a really good point. Like how in heck would we even do that in the first place?
Yeah.
And like the texts I mentioned are just, those are very, like those aren't going to be easy to do if
No.
they're at all possible. So
There's a lot of sci-fi about the stuff you were talking about, though.
yeah.
I think there's been so many books and movies I've consumed, I suppose, like talking about like, half man, half cyborg, in like this post-apocalyptic society, or even the virtual thing you said, living digitally, got me thinking like the metaverse is like, people are talking about that all the time now, I feel like, and there's so many people that think we are currently living in a simulation anyway, so it's like space exploration. There's a whole bunch of different avenues we could go for preserving mankind beyond Earth, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the simulation debate is one that's, you can't really disprove or prove,
Right?
right? Like, I mean, Elon Musk has proposed it on like, I think like Joe Rogan's podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's no way to disprove that we're not in a simulation. So like, you know, science as of right now can't doesn't have anything to say about that. So definitely an interesting question. And that, if we weren't a simulation, it's like,
Okay, then
like what are we doing?
yeah, no, why are we doing this then?
And so there you go. There's another existential threat for you to ponder. But yeah, I mean, the nice thing about talking about space travel is it gets us thinking about, it really connects all the existential threats together, because it raises the question of climate change and like saving our only planet right now. And it also begs the question of, like you were saying, like the commercialization of the moon and space, and warfare in space and things like that. And then obviously also, how would we get from Earth to another planet? And then that also raises the potential for technologies that don't exist yet and that seem very, very far-fetched, like cryopreservation and digitizing our consciousnesses essentially. And so yeah, I think it's a very critical conversation to have. It sounds like both of us are in agreement that Earth should be the priority right now. That doesn't mean that space isn't awesome and that we should explore it at some point. And maybe that's why it's stagnated a little bit, because we've been more focused on kind of Earth issues over trying to get to the moon again. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what the future holds. We'll see if there's like another kind of space race or something. Hopefully the Artemis stuff with NASA and all the things Elon Musk is trying to do. Maybe he should start focusing on SpaceX more than Twitter.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I think it'd be more successful.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys think. Kind of, try to have these conversations too, because this concerns all of us and our futures. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you, Neha, for proposing the idea, essentially. And we'll see you on the next podcast episode. Bye.
Bye.